In this video we talk about Waterloo Enemy Mistakes. This is an Italian war game that now is being distributed by Ares Games, and in fact I picked up my copy at the booth of Ares on the last Gen Con. It is a war game, probably the title gave you a clue about that, and it is in essence a miniature game. That is, it is played in a play area that is not divided in blocks, in discrete areas with discrete partitions. It is played in open space, of course, in a scaled down reproduction of a battlefield, in this case that of Waterloo, but you do not have different areas. And in fact, you move by using a ruler, and so you move in free open space. The advantage, of course, is that here all of the components come already ready to go. You have the board that represents the battlefield. It has a map on it and looks really nice, looks pretty authentic. And then you have game pieces, which are large, sturdy cardboard tokens with information printed on them. This is great because I like miniature games. I like the tactical possibilities of moving, well, not exactly either here or here, but in a range, possibly infinite range of possibilities. I like that freedom, but on the other hand, I'm not good and I don't have the time or the interest in building and painting miniatures, in assembling large armies, in building terrain. So here I can get the mechanics and the gameplay which I like without having to worry about the production, pretty much assembling my own miniature game. For this, hooray, I was very, very excited. So, two-player game, also playable in solitaire because of the random elements of the design. There is a moment in the turn in which people are doing secret selection of resources, they're bidding for initiative, but even if you're playing solitaire, the best of your possibilities, you're playing both sides, you roll a die, there are ways of solving that. Anyways, without further ado, let me show you Waterloo Enemy Mistakes. The play area is represented by this really nice large board, which is actually two boards that go next to one another to form the general area of the confrontation. Again, very large, very nice looking. As you can imagine, since we are Waterloo and you may have heard of that battle, you may know more or less how things look like at the beginning of that battle. The French will set up around here, while the English will be defending around there. And here we have the area that Blucher will use to enter the board. Starting, well, from turn 8, Blucher will try to enter the board. It's unclear exactly when that will happen. You need to roll a die and see what happens, so you have a little bit of uncertainty there. The game, the rules say that the game can be played by 3 players, 1 player being the Prussian reinforcements. I don't know if for the player would be all that fun to sit there for half of the game waiting until he or she can enter the board, so 2-player game really. Now, important element of the game, commanders. Each player has an area where you see the portraits and the names of the commanders, and here we have the Prussians. At the beginning of each turn, the players roll a die and they add the number of commanders that they still have in play. That is the number of these cubes that they will receive for the current turn. Then they will select a number of these cubes that they will use for initiative. Basically, they're bidding for initiative to see who has initiative for the current turn, and the remaining cubes can be assigned to these generals. These generals generate a certain number of command points each turn, as you can see from the number printed there, plus the cubes that you assign to them can also be used as command points. Each turn you can add no more than 2 cubes to a commander, and a commander can have no more than 4. This is pretty important because that means that to execute some complex maneuvers that will require a lot of cubes, you have to build up, and once you burn those, well, you're kind of like restricted. Things are set into motion, things have a certain momentum that you need to build up, and once you have it, great for you, but you kind of have to go with it. I like this idea very much. Military units are represented by these large, fairly thick, and really good quality counters. In the information that you find here, the number of stripes here on top tells you the quality of the unit. It can go from recruit to then veteran all the way to guard. The number of dots that you find here is the firepower. This is simply the number that you use for setup in the standard game, identification of the group the unit belongs to. Of course, the illustration tells you if the unit is infantry or cavalry. We also have artillery, which is represented by smaller game pieces. Here we have horse artillery, here we have regular artillery. And then we have this number here in the bottom right corner, which is the number of, well, life points, health points. When you take losses during the game, you will use these counters here to pretty much modify that number. Here we have a 5, that unit takes 1 loss, and then I cover that number with a 4. That's how it works. Now, we were talking about the fact that commanders will need to issue orders, and again, they will spend points to do so. A unit may be shaken from a previous turn, and then you can spend an order to remove a yellow cube that represents the shaken condition. As you can imagine, being shaken is not good, especially if you find yourself stuck in melee. You can use orders to reorganize your formations, pretty much move your units, reorganize the line without moving closer to the opponent. You can also execute the most complicated, the most expensive order of them all in terms of command points and command cubes, which is to start marching. To start marching, that is to place a formation, to start moving a formation that is not moving yet, you need to spend a number of command points equal to the number of units in the formation plus 1. So if I want to move these two units together as a formation, Pordalon has to spend 3 command points that again can be the ones that he generates normally and or the cubes that you may have received at the beginning. And so once the unit starts moving, the formation starts moving, I place a green cube on it to indicate that, well, now it is now in movement. Also, the movement, the larger the formation, so the more terrifying it is in combat, but also the slower it is. In fact, for example, a formation of 2 units will move by up to 3 segments, a formation of 4 units, only 1 segment, for example. And so we are gonna move, and as we move, we may charge, we may maneuver around. What is interesting is that once a unit is moving, it is less expensive to keep it moving. That is, in following turns, if the unit has a green cube, it only costs 1 command point to keep it moving. But if you do not spend a command point, then the unit loses the movement status. And, well, getting it started again will be as expensive as I told you earlier. This is kind of like the general idea about orders. Incidentally, this is not the first thing they do in a turn, very important, is Napoleonics. So we have artillery, so at the beginning of the turn, you have an artillery phase in which the artilleries that are ready to fire can fire on the opponent. And it's a very simple, very intuitive way of resolving combat. This one, the melee is one different beast. Basically, you simply roll 2 dice when you are resolving artillery fire. You roll 2 dice, and you take modifiers into account only if you roll 5 or more for, I don't know, some reason. Right there, that's a 3 unmodified. But if I roll this, then I actually would be looking at the modifiers here on this table, which is on the back of the rulebook. I'll look at these modifiers here, and then I'll look at this table, and I'll check the result, and pretty much you see what it does. You get a sense here of what those results are. After you have done the bombardment, that is when you assign those orders that I mentioned earlier, and then you simply resolve those actions. Moving, engaging the enemy, etc., etc. Of course, you will want to know how you resolve melee, how that works. Oh, well, there are several steps. To start with, well, you get to attack, ta-da, not that
hard to figure out, then the opponent may be able to counterattack. Then if there are other formations that are there, then supporting formations of the attackers may also do their thing, and then supporting formations of the defender may also participate. So it may become a sort of like a vortex that is like dragging everybody in. But hopefully, in most cases, things will not be so dire. Now, there will be several steps that you have to take into account when you resolve combat. First, each player will roll one die, apply modifiers. There is a lengthy list. Feel free to pause the video and go through all of this list here. Lengthy. You roll a die and you take into account all of those modifiers. What I do, yes, I roll a die per side in melee, and then I simply use the die to take into account the modifiers, and sometimes I use multiple ones. Oh, +3, -1, +4, etc., etc. When you have the final modified die roll, you subtract, you calculate the difference. So you subtract the lower number from the higher, and then you see, well, what happens there. This has to do with the position. Now, then also you roll a die to see if unit that was involved in combat, if that unit takes damage. So again, they may have to adjust the number of health points. As for damage, different game effects may give you damage or losses, which we kind of use a synonym when we just speak in common parlance, but here they have two different meanings. A loss is, yes, a natural reduction on the number of points that you have on the unit. A damage is a potential loss. For each damage that you receive, you roll a die, and only if you roll a 1 or a 2, that damage is converted into a natural loss. So if you have a result that gives you a loss and 2 damages, in truth that may mean 1, 2, or 3 losses. You just don't know yet until you roll the dice for those two. Damages. So we rolled to see pretty much who retreat, if there is an opportunity for pursuit, if a unit is routed, etc., etc., etc. Then we roll to determine the damage. And then also, in case of a retreat, we roll, and it's the most complicated procedure I find it, we roll again to determine by how many ticks the retreating unit retreats. Again, each side rolls a die, you apply modifier, you subtract the lower from the highest, and get this, you divide that by 2, and that is the number of ticks by which you retreat. I can't believe that they couldn't think of a simpler way. Incidentally, as you can see, this is, I showed you earlier also, but still, these are the rules that are used to regulate movement, so you don't have to worry about inches. It's all about the standard ticks, inches or centimeters or whatever. So, well, I guess these are the basic ideas. There are a couple of several other things like terrain. There's a procedure for limbering, unlimbering your artillery as you move it around. But this is pretty much the general idea. Range combat only comes from artillery. Pretty much the infantry infantry and cavalry will attack each other and inflict damage in melee, and you will try, of course, to gain a position, use combined armies, use cavalry as support, because cavalry against infantry is not particularly effective in most cases, and so on and so forth. You continue like this, assign orders, resolve bombardments, maneuver, resolve melee, and possible sequences, not chains of melee sequences, until either one side has captured the supreme commander of the other side. So if you capture Wellington or Napoleon and you are on the other side, you win the game immediately. Otherwise, the game continues for 19 turns, and at the point victory is assigned based on elimination of enemy units and control of key locations on the map.
Now, I found that this game was okay. There were things that I liked very much and things that seemed a little bit of a missed opportunity that fell a little flat for me. What do we start from? Something probably people will not like, but I will put on the side of the things that I like. Moving those units is hard. Getting them to move is hard, and once you're committed to that, you want to keep them moving. so you don't have to restart the entire process of building a pool of cubes before you can execute some complicated maneuvers. Your army is large, doesn't move very fast. Your army is low and lean and is going to get smashed as soon as it crashes into an extended enemy line of the opponent. I like that. Again, not everybody may like that because these units feel clunky, feel cumbersome to move. But to me, it really fits the theme, if nothing else, because when I think about Napoleonics, I'm thinking about Clausewitz. And it just feels so Clausewitzian that here, in fact, you have, well, in war, everything is simple, but the simplest things is complex. The simplest thing is difficult. I'm just moving people, but if it's an army that you're moving, and just people that are putting one foot after the other, it should be a simple thing, right? But no, if that simple thing is performed by an army, it becomes very difficult. And yeah, I like the fact that you don't have a lot of rules for all the crazy things that you as a commander have to take into account. Simply the fact that you have to wait some time to prepare the pools of cubes, so it gives you the sense that as you're putting those cubes there, the commander is there busy in trying to figure things out, how to address things that he did not expect would happen, and so on and so forth. I like that. Also, I like the fact that precisely because of the system, this command system, you as a French player, of course, you have the burden of the attack, and that makes perfect sense. You know the pressures are coming. You can't just sit there and hope for something good to happen to you. It won't. But I like the fact that you do not, because of the order system, you cannot attack with your entire line. There are other games about Napoleonics. They're very simple, and some of them are good. The classic SPI Napoleon of Waterloo. It's a perfect introduction to wargaming and to Waterloo, but of course, all the French can attack at the same time, which is not what happened. Of course, different sections of the French were trying to puncture the enemy line, and here pretty much that's what happens here. You can't attack with everybody, and then you select, and maybe you'll try to do like it happened historically. You're gonna try with Hugomont, or then maybe you're gonna try with trying to break another section of the line. But the fact is that you have to choose your battles quite literally. You have to prioritize as the French player, and probably that's why playing the French is usually a lot of fun in games about Waterloo. Playing the Allies is also fun because you feel so strong, but of course it's more reactive, and when the Prussians come and you're like crashing them, and you try at least to crash the French into this like closing jaw of units, that of course is very rewarding. So I like that. I like how the order system influences the pace of the action, the number of units that you can activate, and therefore results in a series of very tough decisions, especially for the French player. For the English player, for the LA player, also reacting is not necessarily all that easy, and there are definitely many reasons to be interested in that. I like that. Things that I didn't like all that much, the combat system and the modify system seemed a little bit convoluted. Sometimes I was thinking, there are times in which I was thinking about the cons of Danshire, like you roll dice to see how many dice you roll. With the damage system, I like that, but the damage system, it's okay as you roll and then re-roll, but there are just so many other things in which you're adding different modifiers and half in this and half in that. I just had the impression probably you could do more or less the same with a little less convoluted, complicated procedures. And possibly the game is less convoluted than it looks from the rulebook. The rulebook I found very hard to understand. Information was there, but was not where you would expect it. At a certain point I read in rule book about routing, and it turns out that routing, how it works, is in a column in a completely different part of the rule book. So from what it is to when it happens, well, you have to go around the rulebook a little bit. And I read the Italian versions, which is how the designers described the rules originally. I don't know what happened in the translation. Maybe they managed to make it, to fix it, but of course chances are that actually the translation is going to be a little weaker than the original. So you gotta have some patience with this rule book and just set things up, go through all the motions, and be patient that way. So I don't know if it's just because of how hard it is to get there, or because effectively it feels like there are just a couple of there are just a number of things that you have to perform that are logistically there, take into account this, move that, that I don't know that they were strictly necessary. Also, as for the miniature, again, I like miniature games, as I said in the introduction, and I like them especially at the tactical level. In fact, my favorite miniature games are man-to-man, or man-to-woman, or woman-to-woman, or man-to-monster. Well, you got what I mean. It's individually based combat. Here, when we are on this scale, yes, I could go anywhere I wanted, but in truth, that's not gonna happen because these units are clunky and heavy to move, which is okay. It's historical, but that also means that precisely like it happens historically, and that's fine too. The French player is gonna try a series of pushes against the British line, and then the Prussians are coming, and the British try to hold the line, which pretty much means that with this specific theme, with this specific historical situation, I don't know that the miniature system was necessary. I don't know that if it was a map made of, divided in hexes, or heck, even in squares maybe, I don't know that we would have lost a lot. In this case, a little bit like this, a little bit like that. It's not all that important. French troops are not going to be all that creative in their maneuvers because the system, rightfully enough, doesn't allow them to do so, nor the British are going to be particularly creative. So to me, the having to go and use the rulers, that's not a problem, but I don't know that it was all that necessary, that the system really gains all that much from it. So in general, a little bit of a mixed bag. I like the general idea, I like the command system. I wish it was simplified a little bit. I like to play a game based on the same system, but maybe on different battles, or on the same battle, but with a different map that would simplify movement. In general, again, I liked it. I liked it. I didn't love it. I think it was an okay game. For Napoleonic fans, it can still be something interesting to look at. It can be a miniature game that you play even if you don't want to build and paint miniatures, such as myself. The only problem is, alas, it doesn't feel much like a miniature game. But again, in general, it's an okay game.